What is up, everybody? Welcome to the first episode of the Pokrass Perspective here on the League Winners channel. Thank you guys so much for tuning in for the first edition of the show. It's been a little bit since I've been in front of the mic, in front of the or behind the mic, in front of the camera, in terms of a podcast, a live show format, whatever way that you want to describe it, but I'm excited to be back. This is something that I've always enjoyed. I've had plenty of versions of this over the course of the years, and it's very fun to be back. It's very fun to be doing this again. So, with it being the first episode, the first edition of the show, I felt that I might as well dive in to what this show will essentially be. This show will be a combination of a lot of different football coverage, right? This show will cover college football. I specifically, for the League Winners, the presenting company behind this show, the main company I work for, we'll be talking a lot of Florida Atlantic Owls, South Florida Bulls, FIU Panthers over the course of the show. Lots of other college football will be talked about on this show. Really excited to bring Landon Speck on to preview the Memphis UNLV game and talk all things Memphis Tigers, dive into some NFL as the year goes on, as we approach the regular season. We're going to talk high school football. If you guys follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you guys would have caught my interview, or really my preview segment with Christian Proscia of New Era Prep and of Canes Insight, talking about all things Florida high school football heading out of week 1 and heading into week 2, which kicks off tomorrow night. Like I said, I'm just really excited to be back. I'm very excited to be in this spot, being able to do a show, being able to do my own show. I want to bring my own flavor to this. I want to bring my own perspective to this, hence the name of the show. And I can't wait to get things started. College football, which will be really the focus of tonight's episode, has so many different things going on right now. There are cases where we're arguing, should pro players be able to come back? There's all the legislative aspects that are happening for, the Protect College Sports Act, and is that okay? And all these other things. It's a very hectic time, but it's also a very exciting time, right? It feels that heading into a new year, there's so much wide openness. There's so much excitement surrounding so many different programs. It feels like we've gone through one of those cycles where, there's a lot of new head coaches at higher levels of football. There's also a lot of new head coaches and exciting situations at the group of 6 level. There is so much football to talk about, and I'm really excited to see how it all shapes up. And it's one of those things where there is going to be endless discussion, endless guests to bring on, and I truly cannot wait to see what the show becomes and what it develops into over the course of the weeks, days, months, and hopefully years that I'm doing this. So welcome to the first episode of the Pokrass Perspective. My first guest is here earlier than I expected, and speaking of one of the teams that I cover, the South Florida Bulls, he's one of the best follows you could be following on social media when it comes to covering USF, South Florida, whatever one you want to clarify it as. Colby Allfrey, how we doing?
Yo, thank you for the kind words, Brandon. I'm excited. If you guys are tuning in and you don't know Brandon, I'm just going to say Brandon knows ball. I think that could be another name of the show. But I always enjoy our chats about USF and other teams around the area and the conference, all that good stuff. So thank you for the kind words. I'm excited to be on the inaugural episode. Is this what this is?
It is, and you're the first guest.
Wow.
How are you feeling?
That's this might go on the top of my resume. This might be yeah. No, I'm feeling good though. It's good. I'm happy to be here. We ready to talk some USF Bulls football, baby?
Yeah, it's so funny. I feel like it was one of those things where you blink and you miss it. It felt like one of those things where you and I were at the spring game, and I feel like I closed my eyes for approximately an hour, maybe 2 hours. Week 1 is next week.
Yeah,
we are here. The Bulls have finally named a starting quarterback. Feels like things are coming into focus. Talk about what you've seen over the course of fall camp, and I want your take. What do you think of the Bulls naming Michael Van Buren the starting quarterback heading into their matchup with the FIU Panthers?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall this is a decision that I know me and a lot of the people around, covering USF kind of expected. It was pretty clear, even in the limited amount of practice that, I was able to see that Michael Van Buren was kind of the top dog. He was taking the first rep of every drill that I was able to see. He, is the guy that we kind of, when we, went into out of the portal into the spring, out of the spring, he was always the guy that we kind of assumed would have that job. So it wasn't surprising for me. I think there, are some good things that you can take from what Brian Hartline said on Tuesday. First thing is that he was, really Van Buren won the job according to Hartline in the team's last scrimmage, which I think was last Saturday or over the weekend at some point. The team's second scrimmage, Van Buren really showed out. He said, Hartline said he was putting the ball in the right place. And so I think that is a super good sign for USF fans. I do think it's also a good sign in terms of the timing. I think that if this was a competition that dragged out and a competition that even ended up and Luke Kromenhoek winning the job, I think that would have been a lot more discouraging for this USF offense overall. I think Van Buren brings a ceiling that Kromenhoek just would not be able to bring. And I think that's a really good sign for first year, head coach, bringing in, his first time hiring offensive coordinator, Tim Beck. That's so I think it's very interesting that I think the timing is encouraging, but I do think this is no shock to people who are really plugged into USF football.
Yeah, and when we were at American Conference kickoff, I remember we had that discussion over, how real of a shot the Kromenhoek have to win that job. And you know what? Obviously, there's a lot of coach speak. From what Hartline said in his presser, it sounded like it was a lot closer than a lot of people gave credit for. But I'm not really surprised with the decision either, right? If you look at the two in terms of their careers, Kromenhoek is the one that you would think needs more of that development, needs more of that time to really grow into the system, where Van Buren has already had the college success, right? He's already produced at an SEC level, obviously not at a level where he's obviously still with LSU from last year, but he has shown the ability to make plays on the football field. He can extend plays. He has a good arm. And we saw that in the spring game, right? It wasn't like he was hitting all these explosive plays, but he kept the offense on schedule. He extended plays with his legs, and he did make a good chunk of throws. And I think that's going to be important, right? In an offense that wants to be balanced, an offense that is incorporating more of those pro-style elements, you want a quarterback that isn't making those mistakes. Now, you still want the quarterback that can make the big plays, but I think, and Hartline has expressed this, and I think you can reinforce this as well, he wants a guy that isn't going to turn the ball over. He wants a guy that's going to protect the football and make sure that this offense is executing at its highest possible level in an overall sense.
Yeah, and a few weeks ago, I can't remember what presser this was, but Hartline basically said, we're not afraid to drive 10 and 12 plays down the field and be a methodical offense. And I think, with the pro style, it's going to be a huge change from, what we saw in the last 3 seasons with Alex Golesh, calling the plays. And it is super important for a quarterback in a pro style offense to be on time and to also be on target. And that's really a positive sign for Van Buren, because we know he has the ability to make plays outside of the pocket. I think that's probably his strongest skill set, is being able to escape. I think the biggest thing I was impressed of in spring, and I think Brandon, you could probably piggyback on this, is his pocket maneuverability was fantastic. He was so good at sliding away from pressure, escaping, staying in. I was super impressed. The only thing was he just wasn't making the throws, but he was making the plays. He was making good reads. He was just a little bit inaccurate. And I think the accuracy and just the ability to make reads in the new offense has definitely improved. And I think that that's just a really positive sign, because you're kind of getting the best of both worlds if you're USF. If you were, you're getting that quarterback that's going to keep you on schedule, but you're also getting a guy who can create big plays outside of the pocket when the play is down, whether that's picking it up with his legs, which again, a lot of people are kind of misperceiving what Michael Van Buren, and he is not Byron Brown. He is not a running quarterback. He is, I think he's Aaron Rodgers. He's Russell Wilson. He is coming out of the pocket to throw. He's not coming out of the pocket to run, and he can run and he can pick up first downs, but he is a pass-first threat, and I think they're going to lean on him to pass the ball. I don't think they're going to run him very much, especially with how strong the running back room is. But I think his ability to have the best of both worlds, that is the most encouraging thing about this early decision by Brian Hartline to name Van Buren the starter.
And I'm going to transition shortly into something you just said, but to talk about that decision process, the fact that they made it now, I feel like, and you mentioned this earlier as well, the fact that they're doing it now so that they're giving their guy ample opportunity to be entrenched as the starter, I feel like that's missed by a lot of people, right? It's like, not missed by a lot of people. I don't think people truly understand the gravity of that, right? When you fully give the starting quarterback the confidence where you don't take it down to the wire, you allow them to get even more confident, be even more of a leader at that position, not have to look over their shoulder all the time, knowing that their position hasn't been fully solidified. That is so important for not only a first-time quarterback in an offense heading into a real game, but a first-time head coach and coaching staff heading into their first real game. And that brings the transition up, because with the pro-style offense, two positions that I think are going to be relied on even heavier or much more involved than they were last year are the tight ends and the running backs. From your time at fall camp and obviously bringing in some of the elements from the spring, what have you seen from those two position groups?
Well, I mean, I think running back, we knew this in the spring, and we know this now. It's going to be one of USF's strongest position groups. I think they are deep and talented in that group. One of the biggest takeaways from fall that actually Tuesday was DJ Crowther came out and he said it's going to be running back by committee, and that's kind of something that I think we had a good idea of. It's not often that you are going to be giving, especially in college, a running back, 80% of the carries. You know the wealth. You want to have multiple good running backs. And I think, USF's top two running backs are super, super dynamic. DJ Crowther is going to be, probably get a few more reps. He's going to be the guy who takes that first handoff in their first game. He's going to be the starter. But him and Jason Collins are kind of a two-headed monster in the backfield. DJ Crowther, both those guys, while at a lower level, whether it's Dartmouth or, Morgan State, those guys showed productivity. They showed the ability to consistently produce chunk runs. I mean, DJ Crowther almost had 1,000 yards last year. So he has he has track record. I think it's going to be a super strong position group. I think behind this offensive line, which is big, it's deep, it's talented. I think that's this is going to be a run heavy offense. This is going to be a lot more handoffs than I think USF fans might be used to from previous years. And I think this is going to be a ground and pound, physical, wear you down, body punches in the first quarter into, knockout punches in the fourth quarter. That's what this offense, if it's going right, is going to be.
Yeah, I fully second that, right? During that spring game, we talked about it. The main thing that stood out was the run game. And it wasn't just the running backs, it was the offensive line too. Right, there are big bodies on both sides of the ball for this South Florida Bulls team. The offensive line has some massive ones. And, you brought up Crowther. I'll bring up Collins. The burst, explosiveness, vision that he has displayed, if that hits in the game, you might be looking at one of the breakout players at the position in the American Conference. It's that type of explosiveness, that type of overall productivity. There's a reason that when he was at Morgan State, he had all that preseason recognition. Like this guy is a player. This guy is a really, really good player. And if everything starts clicking for the Bulls on that side of the ball, I think alongside Crowther, you might have a very fun two-headed monster. Another guy I want to bring up that's kind of one of my sleepers for this year, I'm really excited to see if he can get on the field and produce, is Chase Garnett. He popped in that North Texas game last year. He looked very impressive in the spring game. He's a guy that I expect to continue to progress. He's a guy that I think should see the field a little bit. If you have that guy to be that third change of pace guy, along with whatever Alvin Isaac and Trey Kinkle bring to the table at the position, this is a very fun room that if USF truly wants to run the ball the way I think we both think they're going to, I'm really excited to see what they're able to do. And then the tight ends, I'm fascinated to see what it looks like in a real game. My early takeaway from everything that's been discussed is that they're going to be featured way more than they have been in previous years. And that's exciting because my theory and my real thought that I've been thinking a lot about, especially when you're talking about American Conference play, if you allow your tight ends to be difference makers, it can be the biggest game changer of any position on the field, period.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're going to be featured far more. I think there's a reason why they've been parading Wyatt Sullivan around. Obviously it's nice to have a returner, but you're not going to, bring a guy to media days. You're not going to show him to the media multiple times if he's not going to be a key contributor. And I think that's really what he's on pace for. I think he's going to be the top dog in that group. And I think he showed even in limited, opportunities in the past game that, he really can be a difference maker, can be a strong receiving tight end. And I think he's probably even got better. I think, the motivation and the knowing that tight ends are going to be used more in the offense in 2026, it has to. I mean, he said it's one of the reasons why he came back. And then it also has to motivate you to be better in the offseason, be crisper at route running, be better, more reliable at catching, because you're getting the ball more. And you can say, oh, he's got to practice, be ready for the ball no matter what, but it's human nature. If you're getting the ball, you're going to work harder and you're going to do more things. And I think that's really what we're going to see from Wyatt Sullivan. I think he was under 200 receiving yards. I foresee him being in between 500 and 750, I think. And then, I think USF has some solid depth there, but I really do think Wyatt Sullivan is the top dog, is going to be getting the majority of the targets out of that room. And I think he is going to be, he could be you're looking at a first or second team all conference type of player.
I'm in full agreement there. Before him and Jonathan Eccles started splitting what was already a limited number of reps last year at the tight end position, Sullivan looked very impressive in that Florida game. He had one of the more impressive touchdowns of the year against Florida Atlantic. This is a guy that has all the explosiveness and athletic ability that you want as a pass catcher. He can block. And I think if he is truly a featured element, like I said at the top of this discussion about tight ends, he's the type of player that can be a game changer for the Bulls. Now, flipping to the defensive side of the ball, we could talk about so much, whether it be the secondary, whether it be the transfers they brought in on the defensive line, the linebackers. But I want to give you the floor here. Who are, in your eyes, the three main guys that you're watching on this South Florida defense heading into week 1?
Well, can I pick a coach? Because man, I'm all about defensive coordinator Josh Aldridge. I think I'm gonna keep pumping this out there when I go on podcasts. I think this is going to be the only year that he's with USF because I think he's going to be snatched up by a P4 program. I think he's that good. I think he has just such a solid defensive scheme. He has such a great energy. I know you weren't there, Brandon, but he spoke to the media a couple weeks ago. Man, he was dropping bangers, one-liner after one-liner. It was fun to hear. I just love the energy and mentality he brings to the defense. So that's one. I'm curious to see what the defense looks like, the way that it changes, the different formations, the blitzes, all of it. I'm so excited to see. So I'll pick him one. Maybe I'm cheating, but that's okay. 2. Aiden Jackson, defensive back coming over from Georgia Southern. He was an all Sun Belt player last season. He's going to be playing what is called the star position, which is really more, you could think of it as a nickel corner, but a bigger, more in the box, really just a guy that you're putting down there because you want him to find the ball and make a play. And that's really what he's going to be. He's been making plays in fall camp by all regards, causing turnovers, forcing, negative plays, stuff like that. and he really seems to be motivated he spoke to the media, but seems to be really motivated to put together a really good season. And he seems to just have a little crazy behind him, which I'm all about on the defensive side of the ball. But yeah, I think Aiden Jackson could be a guy you're looking at as, man, how that dude just one sack, one tackle for loss, a forced fumble. Well, he won us the game. He wrecked that game for the other team. Like, that's the type of thing, he's just going to be a game changer on the defense. He's going to be what, forces those turnovers for USF. And then, up front, I think that, you look at the defensive line, you could pick all of those guys, but I'm gonna go to CJ Hicks. I am the former 5-star recruit, transferred over with Heartline from Ohio State. I think he's going to just be kind of a man amongst boys in the American Conference. He's big, he's versatile. He actually, if you guys don't know, I'm sure a lot of you guys watching do. He was a safety coming out of high school. Then he played inside backer with Ohio State. Now he is transitioning into the edge rushing position. So he's going to be coming off the edge, but he's going to kind of, I foresee Aldridge kind of moving him all over the field, having him do all types of things. So I think CJ Hicks is a guy who record, 6 to 8 sacks, have a big, strip sack in a key moment. I think he's another game changer on defense. I think those two guys are going to be the ones who make those big plays. And there's just a lot of solid players around that are going to help on a down basis, stop the run, stop the pass as well.
I love all the guys you brought up, kind of going in reverse order. I think Hicks is the type of guy that, and it'll tie into the first person, technically, that you brought up. I think he's going to be finally allowed to tap into all those athletic gifts, the pedigree that made him that 5-star prospect, right? It feels like for the first time in his college career, he's going to be allowed to be unleashed. And I think Jackson, the second player he brought up, he's going to be in a very versatile spot where, once again, he's going to be allowed to be unleashed. I think Aldridge, and I think a lot of people would probably back this up, he's one of the better coordinator hires made by a new head coach. And he is also, I think, one of the main reasons there's a lot of optimism surrounding this South Florida football team. I know for me, I had a chance to watch the South Carolina defense against Pitt in the Military Bowl last year, the last game of the East Carolina season. I was so impressed with that defensive scheme, the way they got after Mason Heinschel, a very talented Pitt quarterback, right? And you would think, right? Pretty solid P4 team in Pittsburgh. East Carolina, really good season, lost a lot of guys, didn't have a lot of guys in that game. That defense was so instrumental in East Carolina winning that bowl game. I was blown away with what Aldridge did. I think coming to South Florida, having the talent that he has in this overall defense, is going to be very, very, very impressive to watch. I will add one more guy to what you mentioned. I'm really excited to see what Sam Robinson does at linebacker. Grayson Howard's going to be someone that I think is that steady presence, that Mac Harris-like presence in the middle of the South Florida defense. I think Sam Robinson, who himself is a former 4-star, a former Rutgers player who spent 2 seasons with the Scarlet Knights, I think if he's allowed to be unleashed, he, kind of similar to tight end on offense, can be that type of game changer for the Bulls defense. If he's able to chase down outside runs, get after the quarterback, provide good coverage. Like, he has all of the skills and talent to be that impact type player. I think that if everything clicks for him, alongside a guy like CJ Hicks, alongside a guy like Major Dillard that a lot of people are talking up, you could have a very impressive unit for Josh Aldridge's first year with South Florida.
And I do want to kind of just come out and say, like, I think this is going to be the first time in a while that USF in a season is going to be defined defensively. I think that that's going to be the stronger side of the ball for them. I think that's going to be the unit that either, propels them or, isn't, quite elite enough to bring them to the next level. But I really am super high on this defense. I'm super high on Aldridge. I'm super high on the front seven specifically. You mentioned, Howard and Robinson. I think those guys are going to be awesome in the middle of the field. Defensive line, you mentioned the guys. I think they're going to be super, super good. And I think they're quite frankly going to move people in the conference. I don't think there's a lot of lines that are going to be able to really, prevent penetration from USF's front. And I really do think that that's going to be the calling card for this defense. I think that's another reason why when we speak on offense, why it's going to be so run heavy. They don't want the mistakes because I think they know how good this defense is, and they know that it can win them games really on its own. So I think this is something new for USF fans. This team's probably going to be defined by defense. And, I'm not great with USF history, but I don't think that's happened very often in the 30 years of football being played, 29.
I love that take, man. And my last thing for you before we get you out of here, obviously week 1's on the horizon. As of Saturday, it will be officially 1 week until game time. So heading into the start of this 2026 season, I don't want to give you a specific number because, we could go on and on about trying to narrow down, 3 main things or 5 main things. But I want you to kind of discuss what you're looking for this year from South Florida and kind of in overall sense.
Yeah, I think at the peak, you're looking for true conference championship, competition and aspirations. And you're really looking for USF to take the next step as a team who we know is investing in their football program as much, if not more than any team in their conference. A team that does not have a track record or a history of success. They, this year, with a lighter schedule, need to take the next step of winning all the games they're supposed to win and taking care of business against teams that have them circled on their schedule. Whether it be they passed up on the players on the team or just USF's the best team in the conference, whatever it is, USF has to find a way to stave off and prevent the upsets. And I think that's going to be the next big step for the USF program. That's going to be what's the difference between them going 8-4 or 9-3 with the schedule, or 11-1 or 12-0 or 10-2 or whatever it is. They have to find a way to go into the road, go into a sleepy environment and take care of business. And that's really the biggest thing that I'm looking for. And then really, another thing is what is Brian Hartline as a head coach? How does he bring this team together? We don't know. We have a good idea. We hope, we think that this is going to be this slam dunk hire, and he's going to fit right in with his mentality, his recruiting, all that stuff. But we don't know how he brings together. We don't know what the staff he's brought together is going to work together. We don't know how he evaluates a full team of talent on both sides of the ball. How he runs. How is he going to use his timeouts? His challenges, replays. All that stuff. How does he, how involved he is with the offense? Is he going to let Beck do his thing? Is he going to, let Tim Beck, struggle to a fault? That's a big concern that I know, me and a lot of other people around USF might have. So I would say those are the 2 things. Those are really those 2 things that I'm truly, honing in for a full season of work for the Bulls.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. I'm someone that's coming into this year with optimism, right? Now, whether that is founded optimism or not, I'm very fascinated to see. But a lot of that is based on the schedule. I don't think this is a very daunting schedule. It's a schedule where, let's say I think their minimum should be 8 wins, 8 to 9 wins, based on the teams they play, based on some of the teams they avoid, based on what I think this team's talent level is, based on what the investment into this football program is.
Absolutely.
Right? Because of what you did last year, because of what your investment has been like, because of the pedigree of the coach that you brought in, regardless of him being a first-time head coach, you've now raised the bar, right? So I'm fascinated to see how that looks. And then, it comes down to execution. And can you handle expectations well? And can you handle the eyes and the lights that will be on you inevitably? It's going to be really fascinating to find out. And personally, I'm very excited to see how it goes. It's going to be a very interesting and I think a very fun season for South Florida. But Colby, thank you so much for joining me. Before we get you out of here, where can everyone find you on social media?
Yeah, on X, if you're looking for live, up-to-date, daily USF tweets, coverage, videos, all that good stuff, you can just follow me on X. It's Allfrey Colby. It's my name's last name, first name. all together. And then if you're interested in USF sports and maybe some pro teams, Rays, Bucks, Lightning in the area, you can follow us on words are super hard on Instagram, TB3 Sports Talk, and also YouTube, TB3 Sports Talk. That's where we talk the pro teams. We also post and talk about USF as well. So TB3 Sports Talk, YouTube and Instagram, Allfrey Colby on X.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate having you on. We're going to have you on very, very soon once again.
All right. I look forward to being back. Thanks for having me, Brandon.
Of course. That was Colby Allfrey. Awesome cover. If you want some of the best USF coverage out there and Tampa Bay sports content out there, make sure to give him a follow. Truly appreciate him hopping on to kick off things for the Pokrass Perspective. Now we move across the American Conference. There is an American Conference team that kicks off in week 0. That is the Memphis Tigers, and I'm excited to be joined by one of the best people that is covering Memphis, Landon Speck. Landon, how are we doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Brandon. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. And, it's week 0. It feels like we got here in a very short amount of time. How are things looking for Memphis from an overall sense? Kind of talk about that 30,000-foot view of everything heading into week 0.
Yeah, so obviously the big story with Memphis is it's Charles Huff's first season as head coach. Ryan Silverfield left for Arkansas, and ever since Huff stepped on campus, I'd be lying if I said that the energy just hasn't felt a little bit different. I was talking with some guys who I work with over at Tiger Sports Report at On3, and I think we all agreed this is the most excitement that we personally have felt for a Memphis Tigers football season, just in terms of watching the team, covering it since 2019. And Memphis went to the Cotton Bowl that year, had probably the best season in school history. So just a ton of excitement with the new coach. It's just refreshing. It feels different. Things got a little bit stale with Silverfield, and we're at the point now where Huff still is yet to coach a game, but every time he gets behind a podium and talks, it's just captivating. He gets up there and says something that you just kind of have to marinate on and be like, wow, like this he's just all about it. He's talked multiple times about he comes to the building at about 5 a.m. Then he goes home at 10, 11 o'clock at night and he sleeps. So he literally, all he does is works, coaches football and sleeps. That's what he does. So it's been refreshing from that. It's in that regard. But at the same time, it's built a ton of anticipation for this game because he can say all he wants, but no one's really going to know until they step on the field, which they will finally this Saturday, like you said.
Yeah, and I'm happy you brought that up regarding Coach Huff, because this is a guy that, he has that reputation of bouncing around a little bit right now, but he also has won everywhere he's gone. Has that played a large factor into the excitement surrounding what he can now do at Memphis, a school that is consistently investing at the top of this conference?
Yeah, I certainly think so. He won the Sun Belt Championship at Marshall back in 2024 and then left after that to take the Southern Miss job, which I remember at the time was pretty strange. I'm not completely plugged in on what happened at Marshall, but from what I know, it was just some type of contract dispute, and he ended up at Southern Miss. And so he comes to Memphis, and like you said, the reason there's a lot of excitement is because he's won a conference championship as a head coach in the Sun Belt. And the criticism of Silverfield at Memphis, because while Memphis was one of the most consistent G6 programs, they never won the conference championship under Silverfield. Not only that, they never went to the American Conference Championship game with Ryan Silverfield as a head coach. And Huff's opening press conference from the jump, his whole slogan for this program has been close the gap. He wants to close the gap that has been there for Memphis of, okay, they won 10 and 11 games a couple times, but they haven't won the conference. And when you're spending as much money on the roster as Memphis does in this day and age, largely because of FedEx, that's just somewhat, I don't want to be too strong and say it's unacceptable, but at the same time, they shouldn't have gone 6 years without appearing in the game. So that's been Huff's whole thing is we got to close the gap and we have to get this program to win a championship, to win an American Conference championship, especially now when that would likely in most years probably get you to college football playoff.
Yeah, and it's very similar to another team that is spending at the top of the conference in South Florida, but Memphis has been doing it for a longer time, right? So Huff coming in with that mentality and that slogan, I would imagine it's something that's really resonating with Memphis fans. And a big part of closing that gap is the quarterback competition and the quarterback position. Obviously, a lot of talk surrounding, who's going to be the guy for Memphis. Obviously, still not a formal full announcement yet. What's been your take on that competition up to this point?
Yeah, so Memphis brought in Marcus Stokes, a Division II transfer from West Florida, where he was arguably the best Division II quarterback in the country. And then I believe it was only 4 or 5 days later when Air Noland committed, the South Carolina transfer who was formerly at Ohio State, and he was a big-time high school recruit. Stokes was also committed to Florida at one point, so he himself had some pedigree as a recruit. But I remember just back in January when Stokes committed, I believe Syracuse was one of the schools he chose Memphis over, and then there was some other P4s that he probably would have had a good chance to start at, and he chose Memphis. So at the time, it was a really good get. Still is. And so what I'm saying by that is when Noland committed 3 or 4 days later, it was a little strange because it certainly felt like Stokes came in, and it's one of those deals where like, oh, okay, Marcus Stokes is our quarterback. But then they bring in Noland, and now you look, and they probably have – top to bottom, the best quarterback room in the American, like maybe. I don't know if whichever one of them starts. I wouldn't say neither of them are the best individual quarterback, but just in terms of depth, Memphis, because they brought in Stokes and Noland, who Huff has said many times he feels like both of them can win the Tigers games. It set them up well, just in terms of numbers. And then with the actual competition, my take on it pretty much the whole time has been that I think Stokes is going to be the quarterback. And really that just has to do with the fact that out of him and Noland, who are the only two actually competing for the job, Stokes has playing experience, even though it was at the Division II level. Noland has yet to play meaningful football. And so because of that, and then just kind of the whole way both of those portal recruitments went down, it's always been my understanding that it's going to be Stokes. Now I don't have any intel on that. Memphis has been insanely tight-lipped about this, close to the vest. And you mentioned a formal announcement. I don't expect there to be one. I don't even know if I expect it to leak in the national media as to who's going to be the starter. I don't think anybody's going to know literally until the first snap against UNLV.
Yeah, and I'm in that boat with you. When they landed Stokes, I'd been a fan of Stokes from what I saw from, some of the things trickling out of West Florida with some of those highlights, and everyone kind of being like, all right, if this kid enters the portal, he's going to be one of the more sought after, non like P4 quarterbacks in terms of like those transfers. I had thought it was an amazing get right off the bat. And then when they get Nolan, it's like, all right, it's very interesting. But yeah, I'm in agreement with you on that. I think having a guy like Stokes, at least right off the bat, be that guy, I think that's better for the offense. And hey, maybe if you want to go to Nolan later in the year, if something transpires, I don't think that's off the table either.
No, yeah, absolutely not. And I think I don't want to say Stokes is going to be the starter just to completely discount Aaron Nolan, because he's a very talented quarterback. And I've gotten the question over the offseason of just like kind of give the rundown on both of them. And this might be a little bit disingenuous just because there isn't a lot of Aaron Nolan film out there other than high school stuff, but they're both very similar in what they do. It's not like one of them can run and the other one can't. They both have like decent mobility. They both have good enough, like solid arm strength. And just from what I've gotten to see, they're both, just like pretty accurate. That neither of them have a trait compared to the other that really sticks out. So I think Memphis was intentional in going to get two quarterbacks that both fit what Kevin Decker, the new offensive coordinator, wants to do, which Decker runs. I know you were just talking some South Florida. He runs the same scheme that we've seen at South Florida with Alex Golish over the last few years before he left for Auburn, of course, that ultra wide splits from the receivers, Devere and shoot, where the quarterback gets a lot of control over what's going to happen. And it requires a good zip on the ball too, just because those receivers are running routes from such a wide stance. But I think Memphis, because of that, they were intentional in getting two guys that they believe could play at a high level, win them games with similar skill sets.
I'm very happy you brought up the offensive scheme, because in this offensive scheme, you need plenty of skill position talent. When it comes to Memphis, who are some of the guys that have stood out to you in terms of whether it be a running back, wide receivers, tight ends, etc.?
Yeah, so I think a common misconception with what Memphis wants to do offensively is people hear that it's ultra wide and it's a super spread thing. And it's similar to what Tennessee does with Josh Heupel, and David Weeks, who's now an assistant at Memphis. Both of those guys were at Central Florida, and Decker credits those two for learning the scheme. So people like to think back to that 22 Tennessee year where they had Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt, and they broke the curse against Alabama. and Tennessee was throwing the ball all over the yard, but that's not really what I expect. I expect it to be more like the modern version of what Tennessee does, where it's really they want to run the ball. The reason they're going to get so wide with the splits is so they can give a very clear picture of how many defenders are in the box. And so it's pretty clear if they have 6 guys in the blocking scheme, whether it's the O-line and the tight end or the O-line and the H-back or whatever it may be, if it sits on 5 in the box, they're just going to run the ball all day and take their free 4 yards. That's what Kevin Decker, that's how he words it. So for Memphis, yeah, the running backs are going to be important. They have Dallin Hayden, who's a senior, transferred from Colorado, and he was at Ohio State prior to that. And he's a local kid. He went to high school at Christian Brothers High School, local in Memphis. And behind him, they brought in Jalen Carter, who played at Southern Miss. He wasn't the starter, but he was in the rotation, getting meaningful snaps at Southern Miss with Huff last season. And then there's Manny Colby, who is a transfer from Cincinnati, who was more of just a return specialist for most of last season. But he did step into a big role in the Liberty Bowl against Navy, where he had his best game of the season. And so those are the 3 guys that are really going to be featured at running back. As far as a pecking order goes, it's really Hayden and Carter, I believe, to be the top 2. But Covey's still going to play. It's going to be a legit 3-man rotation. I wouldn't say there's really one that stands out. And then at receiver, which, they're still going to throw the ball. At receiver, there's Terrell Timmons, who came in from Colorado. He's played a lot of football. Just in terms of, how many years he's been in college football. I believe he's a 5th-year guy. And then Brady Cluse is back from last year, who, if you watched any Memphis last year, all Brady Cluse did was make circus catches. And he returns just a solid, good hands guy on the outside. And it's interesting. Him and Timmons are both around 6'2", and they're really the only 2 in this receiver rotation that provide the size. So Cluse and Timmons are the 2 you'll see on the outside with most of the size from the wideouts. And then probably the most proven guy in the room is Tyshawn Chapman, who's going to be the starter in the slot. He came from Southern Miss, another guy that followed Huff, had around 450 yards last season for the Golden Eagles. And then really, I think a big key to this passing game is going to be the tight end position, because Hunter Tipton is Memphis's starting tight end, and he was at Middle Tennessee State last year, where he had a pretty productive season. And when you just look at all the pass catchers and what they've done so far in their college careers, Tipton is the one that honestly stands out the most. He's the one out of this group so far. They haven't played a game yet, but from what we know, if it's 3rd and 5 and Memphis needs to go get a first down, Hunter Tipton might be the guy for that right now. So he has that spot locked up. And then there's some more guys in rotation at receiver, like Stonka Burnside, who was at Mississippi State. There's Alante Brown, who might be the fastest player in the room. He's played a lot of college football at Nebraska and Michigan State. And that's something Memphis emphasizes with the receivers in this scheme, is you got to be fast. You got to be able to have burners and get over the top of the secondary, because that's what Memphis wants to do. They want to run the ball and they want to take shots down the field.
Yeah, and having experience covering the essentially view and shoot offense with South Florida last year, even the air raid down at Florida Atlantic, all these coaches say the same thing, and I'm very happy you hit on it. Their offense doesn't work if they can't run the ball, because running the ball is what opens up everything. It's what opens up it's what opens up the ability to take the shots down the field. So that running back room is probably going to be arguably the main thing I'm watching for Memphis, and I think you would agree. And then when it comes to wideouts, or really just pass catchers, I think Tipton, Cluse, and Simmons are those guys, because when you're taking those shots, it's not just about speed. Speed's very important, but having those size guys that you can really rely on. Think of Keyshawn Singleton last year for South Florida. How many times did they just throw the ball up to him in the middle of the field or down the field, and he's making one of the best catches you'll see of the entire week, right? It's a key component to have that guy on the offense. And kind of following up on that, would you say you're eyeing one of those 3, whether it be Simmons, Tipton, or Cluse, to kind of be that breakout guy on the offense?
Yeah, maybe
in terms of pass catchers.
Yeah. I honestly, this is a worry about me for this group, is I don't really see that out of any of them, and I could be jumping the gun with this, but I mean, I suppose Timmons could emerge, because he hasn't really had a breakout moment yet, although he's been in college football for a little bit. But I guess if anyone would be it'd be him. But that's kind of a critique you could have of this Memphis roster. Is last year they had Cortez Braham, who bailed them out, I can't tell you how many times, and there's just not a guy like that on the team this year, I don't think. And you make a good point with Singleton. I mean, him and then Jeremiah Coger late in the year for South Florida came on as a freshman, and both of them were the taller guys you could just throw that 50-50 ball to. And as of right now, I just don't know if Memphis has that. I think another thing about this passing game too is in the veer and shoot. It's a lot of you have to have a good understanding of coverage, even if you're playing receiver, because it's deep choice routes. So just depending on if you get one high safety, two high safety, if the corner's off, if he's pressed, that dictates what route you're going to run. So I do think the experienced guys who have played in the scheme, like Chapman, who they ran something similar at Southern Miss, they're going to have a leg up in that regard. I'm interested to see just early, how in sync are the receivers with whoever the quarterback is. And you bring up a good point. I think the first 3 or 4 games is going to be a good litmus test for, okay, are any of these guys anything like as Keyshawn Singleton or Bram from Memphis last year? And just in the fact that, okay, it's 3rd and 8, we need this. Let's find our guy in a matchup rather than dialing up a play. Coaches love to say players over plays. And that's one thing I'm interested to see if Memphis has. And the schedule's no joke the first 3 weeks because they're at UNLV and then they're at Boise State week 2. So they'll have some huge tests in trying to find, who are the guys out of this group of pass catchers.
I'm going to put the pin in the week 1 conversation because we're going to get right back to that shortly. When it comes to this defense, though, Jamon Tapp's getting all the headlines in terms of being that guy for this defense. Besides him, and if you want to talk about him, please feel free. Who are some of the other guys that you're looking at on this defense to really be those key, those essentially start at those key positions?
Yeah, I mean, you brought up Tapp. Just quickly on him, he's probably the best edge rusher Memphis has had since Bryce Huff, who was on the team in 2019 and ended up playing in the NFL for a decent amount of time, got some contracts. But yeah, he's a stud. But past him, it's the story of the defense this offseason has been the 3-headed monster that came from Southern Miss and Jamon Tapp, Ian Foster, and Mike Montgomery. And then there's also Amir Foster, who is supposed to be a pretty good player at safety that also came from Southern Miss. But the Montgomery, Ian Foster, both Fosters and Tapp have really been the talk of it. Montgomery's going to be the Mike linebacker. And he's one name that when Huff was doing press conferences in the spring, brought up pretty early just in a guy that stepped up as a leader. He's the one that's getting extra work in before and after practice. And he's gotten all kinds of preseason all-conference recognitions, as has Tapp and Ian Foster, which Ian Foster's, he'll be the main nickel corner for Memphis. He'll be in the slot. He can also play a little bit of safety. He's pretty versatile defensive back. And he could also be a factor in the kick return game. It'll be interesting to see how much Memphis uses him on special teams, just because he'll be getting such a heavy load on defense. But him and Amir Foster are both just a couple chess pieces in that back end that Lance Guidry can really do some things with. So yeah, I mean, they're pretty balanced, and they have Tapp on the D line. They got Montgomery at linebacker, and then they got both Fosters back in the secondary anchoring that. And like I said, they all came from Southern Miss. So the continuity from Southern Miss to Memphis with Huff has been a pretty big story of the roster in total.
Yeah, and I'm happy you brought up Montgomery, because having not only that continuity from Huff's previous spot at that position, but also having a guy that has potential to be one of the better players at his position in the conference, that's one of those ceiling raisers for a defense. And it's one of those things that I think if that hits, and I want to obviously hear your opinion on this too, I think allows Memphis to be at that level that they want to be at least on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. Defense it's been a thorn in the side of Memphis for the last few years with Jordan Hankins at defense coordinator. His scheme was unique in the fact it was one of those 3-3-5s where it was the 3-down lineman, and he last year especially, he dropped 8 a lot, and there would just be a lot of plays where there'd be guys and they'd just be at a disadvantage in terms of their alignment. There'd be guys lined up 5-6 yards off the ball having to go cover the deep middle part of the field, and that's just one example. So I think this scheme with Lance Guidry, he's talked about, I mean, it's a 4-2-5 base, so they're going to have 4-down linemen, and they'll be in nickel. They'll live in nickel like most college teams do these days. And he has been vocal, though, in the fact that, especially up front, he thinks they'll be able to get pretty advanced. But all that to say, I haven't really heard internally and externally, I haven't heard this amount of confidence in the Memphis defense in quite some time. So, just looking at the team and looking at what we do know, there are way more known commodities on defense than there are on offense, just because of the guys we've mentioned. And it, defensive line, just that group in general, it's probably going to be the best defensive line Memphis has had going back to before Mike Norvell. It's been a long time since Memphis has had a defensive line like this one. And Tap's part of it, but it's more about the quantity of just quantity depth, not necessarily the quality, but they just have bodies of guys. Joseph Head Jr. is a Mississippi State transfer on the edge. They have Elijah Kinsler on the edge. Jabari Ishmael, who also came from Southern Miss. This is going to be a theme. There's a lot of guys from Southern Miss, especially in defense. Taylor Burton's back at defensive tackle, which he was on the team last year. One of the few contributing returners that came back. So with the defense, in the past with Memphis, it's certainly, you think of the offense, and that's the side of the ball that you really think they're going to lean on. But this year, I'm not sure yet if it's totally the opposite. But I think just in terms of comfortability and talking about what we do know about the team, the defense is one that's easier to project right now. Is the easiest way to say that.
I agree with you. And now we transition because we're finally going to get to see things on the real field. Heading into this matchup with UNLV, what would you say are the three main things that you're looking for to kind of, whether it be good or bad, to kind of level set for this 2026 Memphis season?
Yeah, I think UNLV as a team, they're similar to Memphis offensively, not in every way, but in the fact that I think they're going to want to run the ball. Whether their quarterback's Jackson Arnold or Alex Orji, I think those are both guys who succeed when they're using their legs, really just to set up the pass. Both of them have struggled as passers in the past. And then they have Jet Thomas coming back at running back, who ran for over 1,000 yards last year. So just with them offensively and defensively, there's a little bit more continuity than Memphis. So I think I've just talked about Memphis's defense. I think it's going to be a great first test for them, especially up front, having to stop the run and forcing UNLV to throw the ball. So that's one thing I'm looking for. And then another thing just is whoever it is at quarterback, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the quarterback when it's going to be a guy that's making their first Division I start, whether it's Stokes or Nolan. I'm just looking for them when they come out in that first quarter, how calm are they? How relaxed are they? Or even really, if they come out in the first quarter and they do throw an interception and they do fumble, how do they respond? Because that's been one thing that Huff has talked about a lot is he knows his team is tough. He knows that they're talented. He knows all this stuff, but he doesn't know what's going to happen when they get punched in the mouth by a player in another jersey because they've been hitting each other for the last month. So that's one thing I'm looking for really is just when, especially at quarterback, when the first thing goes wrong, how do they respond is one thing I'm looking for. And then we'll transition back to the defense. The secondary is interesting because there are the Fosters, but past that, it's just a lot of guys who haven't really been in premier roles yet. Chauncey Logan at corner is back from last year, but he only played 5 games due to injury. And then there's Anthony Richard at corner who came over from Southern Miss, and he was at Marshall before that. And then Ellis and Darius Malcolm are the other two at corners. And corner is one of those positions where they just don't really have a guy. It's like receiver. There's some bodies and there's some guys that you believe are going to give you good snaps, but I'm just interested to see, what the snap share is with those guys, like who plays and how much. But yeah, I mean, just the main thing really, stopping the run, forcing UNLV to throw. And I'm just interested to see how this team looks when something goes wrong, because it inevitably will.
Yeah. And kind of touching on the quarterback thing, I'm always excited when it's that first game because you finally get to see how guys respond in those real situations, right? Because you have the practice situations. It's like, hey, third and whatever, we're going to work on this, get through your reads, see what you can do, etc. And now, if you don't get through your reads, you're getting sacked or you're actually making a turnover. The play's not getting blown dead because the defensive lineman gets close enough to the quarterback where the coaching staff thinks it's a sack, right? It's all live. The same thing goes for the defense, right? So you mentioned the run game for UNLV. Can Memphis execute and get those tackles? Can they bring the ball carriers down to the ground? Can they make sure that they're not committing those mental mistakes? Flipping back to the offense, not just the quarterback. Can Memphis run the ball effectively? How does their offensive line, a new revamped unit, look? Can someone emerge at wideout? And even if no one emerges as the number one, are you creating separation? Are you doing enough to make those vertical plays down the field? Obviously, week 0 is not the portender for season success or season failure, but is that first level setting opportunity where you can truly see what is the talent level of this team and where are they going from here.
Yeah, you bring up a good point with the offensive line, because that's another spot at Memphis. I think both sides of the ball, the trenches, are two sides that the staff has felt really good about, just based on what they've told us in press conferences. The O-line is deep, just in the fact that I think there's 7 or 8 guys who you could plug in and play and feel really good about. Parker Mitchell's back from last year, so there's some continuity there at guard, but he's not even really a pencil-in starter. They brought in Martin Woodzema from Old Dominion, Skylar Grant from Old Dominion, who played for Kevin Decker, Philip Gray from Richmond at center, and then Kobe Keenum also in the interior from Mississippi State. And then at tackle, there's Aaron Karras from Colorado State, Riley McGee from Arkansas State. So they have some guys that they feel good about, but the offense in whole, all those guys I just named other than Mitchell haven't played at Memphis yet. The quarterback hasn't played at Memphis yet. The running backs haven't played. The receivers, except Cluse, haven't been at Memphis. Like, it's almost, if I'm a fan, it's a little nerve-wracking, because you're putting a unit of guys out there who either haven't played at Memphis, haven't played at this level, or haven't played college ball at all. So I'm interested. I'm really, really intrigued to see just what it looks like you said, because when it's not that scripted situation, it's just, how are you going to perform under those lights when things are going fast and the game's moving quick? Just what's that going to look like? And I like week 1 or week 0 in this case definitely isn't something you can't judge how the whole season is going to be based off the one game. But if you're Memphis, I think it's exciting in the fact that they have an opportunity to go out and just kind of enforce themselves in the G6 driver's seat right away. If they can go, and same for UNLV. If UNLV can get this one against Memphis, it's a big game for both teams. It's being played before most other schools even play a game. So I think it's exciting just because of that. And yeah, I'm interested to see what that offense looks like, really, more than anything.
It's one of those very unique situations where, everyone talks about how you're not always at your best at the beginning of the season. Memphis is arguably playing one of its most important games of the season in week 0, and then one of their other most important games of the season in week 1. So to that point, not only is that nerve-wrackingness just because it's the first time you're seeing everything on a field, it's because these games are going to have massive implications for the entirety of the 2026 season. It's probably one of the more unique cases of this that I've seen, very, very similar to that week 1 game last year between USF and Boise State.
Yeah, that's a great comparison, actually. I remember that game on a weeknight, and it was, it felt huge for both teams, and I think this one's going to have a similar feeling for both Memphis and UNLV. Now, it's like, if you lose, the season's not over, but like you said, it just puts whoever wins this, in a really good position heading into week 1, and then you even looking ahead a little bit for Memphis to week 2, where they travel to Boise. It's an interesting dynamic, because they are important for that playoff race, because UNLV and Boise State are both teams that expect to be in that race. Actually, they were the two, I believe in the AP poll, they were the 2 teams, G6 teams, that received the most votes. So there's a lot of buzz about both of those teams. But Memphis gets through both of those games in Arkansas State week 1, and they haven't even had conference play yet, and they've potentially played their 2 toughest games of the season already. So whether they win one, lose one, win both, lose both, we're going to know so much about Memphis heading into conference play. And that's something I think that's, maybe even better for them than it is for us, because Memphis will be going into that conference play. They'll have taken some scars already, and they should be, locked and loaded, ready to go through an American slate that it's tough, because all those marquee games are on the road, like the South Florida and the Navy and Tulane. They get all those on the road. So I'm excited, really, just to see both of those road games against Boise and UNLV this early in the season, because it's not like one of those schedules where they got 3 or 4 cupcakes in September and then we got to wait till October to really see what the team's made of. We're going to know pretty early.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me to my last question, right? With not only those 2 games to start off the slate, but kind of looking at everything this year, what are essentially the 3 main things, or just the main things that you're watching for Memphis this season?
Yeah, so I'm pretty bullish on them just from a prediction standpoint. I really believe that this is a year where they can win 9 or 10 games. I think that's what they'll do. Um, but the biggest thing for them is just finding the mesh of guys on offense. I think at all the positions, really, other than tight end and then quarterback, because they'll have their starting quarterback. But the running backs, the O line, the receivers, it's just a lot of mixing right now of different guys. So I think finding your guys early and just getting that group rolling. As early as possible is going to be something I'm looking for. But because like we said, it's a group that doesn't have really any continuity at all. Um, and then defensively, really just is the D line as good as advertised? Because if it is arguably potentially the best defensive line in the conference, it's going to do wonders for them because Huff, he coached with Dick Saban in Alabama as the associate head coach back in 2020 for a couple years, and he shares the same philosophy in that if you have a good defensive line and you have a good quarterback, you can win games. And so I think that's why Memphis went so heavy on the D line. So just seeing if that group is what everybody thinks it can be, I think is something that's going to be important. And really, I'm looking to see how. I know we've already talked about it so much, but I really think the first 3 games are just going to say so much about Memphis. I think if Memphis can go 2-1, if they can split the 2 West Coast road trips, I think they'll be in a really good spot going into conference play. And then I'll add just one more thing about just the schedule. Silverfield has been somewhat infamous over his time as a college head coach at Memphis and just losing games he's not supposed to. So I'm interested to see if Huff, does this team run into that? Do they have Army at home? They have East Carolina at home, which could still be tough games even though they're at home. But even like the UAB at home or the Temple at home, like is Memphis, what's going to happen when they do get a big win? They go on the road and gut one out, and then they're on top of the world, and then they come back and they have to play, a team like a Temple at home. How are those games going to go? Because Silverfield's teams in the past have been prone to lay an egg in those games. So really, just how does the team handle just the ebbs and flows of a season? Really is what I'm most excited to see because there's really no way to tell how that's going to go covering camp.
Yeah, 100%. I am really excited to see what Memphis does this season. For me, I think between them and South Florida being these 2 teams that invest so much, 2 very similar teams in terms of how they invested in the trenches and kind of all this uncertainty of how they're going to actually look when they play games. It's going to be really interesting to find out what they're both made of. And like you said, Memphis is going to find out very, very early what they're made of, playing some of the toughest non-P4 out-of-conference games probably in the entire country. And with that, my friend, thank you so much for joining tonight. Before we get out of here, where can everyone find your work?
Yeah, at Landon Speck 2 on Twitter /X is where you'll see most of my stuff. I'll be covering all the games live and putting out everything I write. And then also on TikTok at Landon_Speck is I'll post some press conference clips over there. Just on what Huff has to say throughout the season. So those are really the 2 main platforms for me. And then I'm at Tiger Sports Report at On3 Memphis is where you can find all of my written work.
I truly appreciate you coming on. I'm excited to have you on throughout the season. It's going to be a very fun college football season that starts much earlier for you compared to the rest of the country. I'll catch you soon.
Thank you, Brandon.
That was Landon Speck providing some of the best Memphis coverage around. Make sure to follow him. Make sure to just engage with all his work. Like Colby, he's one of the best covers for one of the premier teams in the American Conference. And I truly appreciate him hopping on the first episode of the Pokrass Perspective. It's truly fun how the college football season is essentially here, right? There's so much that happens in over the course of an off season, right? Whether it be the transfer portal, whether it be all these different things happening, it seems that so much of the focus nowadays is on the inner workings and all the external stuff of college football. But at the end of the day, the most exciting and fun part is what happens on the field. What happens when these newly constructed teams and these new coaches get a chance to show what they're made of on the field. And I'm truly excited to see that, with Memphis obviously being one of the key games of that week 0 slate. I'm truly fascinated to see what that looks like. Obviously, week 1 coming up next week. Fascinated to see what South Florida looks like against a very, very potentially scrappy and fun FIU Panthers team. That game should be very interesting week 1. Myself, might as well reveal this, I will be in Gainesville covering FAU versus Florida. That will be a very intriguing game for FAU to start the year. Maybe not necessarily one that they can surprise the Gators in, but you want to see that offense take some more strides. You want to see that defense show a bit more fight compared to last year. There's a lot of fun transfers on both sides of the ball, a lot of fun returners on both sides of the ball for the Owls, and it should be a very interesting week 1 game. Potentially waiting on one more guest. So looking at the comment section, got one from, we got a comment talking about USF commit Larry Morgan III going to have a great season at West Boca. I'm jumping ahead in my sentence. Larry Morgan was a player that had one of my favorite performances of week 1 of the high school season. If you caught the pre-show clip or segment of myself and Christian talking about high school sports, he was brought up as one of the key players from the past week of games that broke out. He is someone that has provided some great coverage in his first 2 weeks of high school football. Against American Heritage, he was a lockdown, provided some great coverage. Against Carroll City, a team with some of the best skill talent in the state, he provided great coverage all game. South Florida is getting a really good player in Morgan, and I'm really, really, really not fascinated. I'm really excited to see what he does over the course of the rest of the year. In terms of that segment, kind of rehashing what Christian and I talked about, at least from my end. I think that Jeremiah Millicent and Chris Cortinas from Monarch had some of the best performances of week 1. Cortinas went over 200 yards receiving. Millicent went over 300 yards passing. Those are 2 guys that, if you are in the Florida area and you care about Florida high school football, those are 2 guys that you should keep an eye on. And beyond that, Brady Quinn was one of the other best performers of the week. He had 5 touchdowns against Monarch. He's been rolling this season. He has a very intriguing game against the West Coast-based, California-based Sarah Canyon football team. I'm really excited to see what he does. I think he's in store for another good game, and I think he's going to raise his stock even more. And then my pick for week 2's breakout is American Heritage wide receiver Jeffrey O'Neal. He was impressive in short spurts when he was targeted and throwing the ball against West Boca. I think you're going to see a big performance from him against East St. Louis. With our guest still being not here as of now, I am going to wrap up the show. The first episode of the Pokrass Perspective, we went a little bit over an hour, but this was a great start. I truly appreciate Colby and Landon coming on to talk South Florida and Memphis football respectively. This is going to be such a fun endeavor. It's going to be something that I personally can't wait to keep growing, can't wait to bring more and more guests on. And also, for everyone watching, if you have suggestions, if you want to hear certain things talked about, if you want certain topics to be discussed, please leave a comment, send a message. I'm open to a lot of different things. This is going to be fun, a very new project that I'm excited to embark on. And I'm really, really excited. And I'm using the word excited a lot because I really am excited to see where this thing goes. But for myself, Brandyn Pokrass with the League Winners, thank you guys for tuning in to the first episode of the Pokrass Perspective. I will be back here next week at 7 p.m. Same time, same place. You can catch me live. If not, you can catch the replay on the League Winners YouTube channel. So without further ado, you know the closing already. I'm Brandyn Pokrass. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.